Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. Let's talk commentators, boxing commentators, because I've done a few videos. Well, the one I'm thinking of was the one I did on DAZN and the rest of their 2023 schedule. And some people said, yeah, but DAZN's commentators are lousy. And I've heard this from people talking about, well, Sky's commentators are lousy and all commentators are lousy. And they might have one or two. Most people might have one or two that they like. But generally speaking, they don't like commentators. And it got me thinking. I was having a chat with a couple of lads a few days ago about this subject. What do you look for in a commentator? Well, first of all, let's differentiate between the commentator and the pundit, because the commentator commentates on what's going on in the ring, and the pundit is the quote unquote expert who will point out things that are happening and things that might happen, and if so and so does X, Y, Z, it'll lead to A, B, C, and so on. So there's a difference between those two aspects. What I look for in a commentator is, I don't want someone who bunnies on all the time, right? I can get that on YouTube, I can get that from watching my own bloody videos, but what I want is someone who, informs you what's happening in the ring, and there needs to be a rapport between the commentator and the pundit. I don't like people who are overbearing. I don't like the people who like the sound of their own voice and feel they have to boom and screech and try and make out that literally everything is a huge drama waiting to happen. I like honesty. If it's a boring fight, I like commentator to say, Christ, I'm bored. And being the age I am, I'm 56, I go back, way back to Reg Gutridge, Harry Carpenter. Gutridge, for those that don't know, was a very good, a sort of salt of the earth commentator. He had he wasn't over emotional, but you could tell he knew his stuff and he loved the game. He loved boxing through the way in which he would describe the action. I mean, if there was a really dramatic fight going on, he would say, he'd say something like, "Well, what an absolutely fantastic fight." That would be as high as the level of his voice would get, the volume of his voice would get. He wouldn't shout and scream. And he had Jim Watt, the former WBC lightweight champ. I think it was WBC, wasn't it? Lightweight champ. He was his pundit, and together they were fantastic on ITV. And then I think they went over to Sky in the 90s. The BBC had Harry Carpenter, who was far more conservative, very old school. Typical sort of BBC type. Would talk about what was going on in the ring, wouldn't over-egg it, wouldn't ever get dramatic. He actually said, when he was interviewed, he said, is there anything you're really embarrassed about? And I remember going to the closed circuit telly in Leicester Square in the cinema to watch Bruno versus Tyson, the first fight. Harry Carpenter was doing the commentary, and when Frank nailed Tyson with that left hook and shook him, Harry went, "Go on, get in there, Frank, get in there." And he said that was the worst point of his career, because he wasn't being he was allowing his emotions to get the better of him. He was a very conservative guy, a really nice fella. Harry Carpenter always came across as being a real nice stand-up guy. Had a very good rapport with Frank Bruno. Really was good friends with Bruno. Whereas someone like Reg Gutridge was a bit more, he would use lots of analogies or allegories. So and so has been nailed, he's flailing, he's like a sailor in a storm gripping the mast of the ship, or he'd be a bit more flowery, but he wouldn't do it in a really sort of pontified way. He'd just say, but he'd colour things in. You've heard the phrase colour commentator, which I think comes from America. Whereas Harry Carpenter used to do the commentary an awful lot just by himself. Occasionally they'd have a pundit, a guest, but he would and he knew boxing, he understood boxing. I suppose the guy that bridges the old school from the new school really is Steve Bunce, because now I like Steve Bunce as a person. He loves boxing and his enthusiasm is genuine, I think, and he does know a lot about boxing. And I'm not knocking the guy, but I find his sort of melodramatic loudness to be not to my taste personally. I don't need somebody shouting and screeching like their microphone's been switched off and they still want to be heard. I like them to just be cool, give us the information. To me, good commentators, for me, this is my personal taste, good commentators like good referees. You don't even notice they're there. You might listen and you might think, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, yeah. But Steve Bunce, I'm not knocking him, but he's more of a pundit than a commentator, although he has done commentary. Normally when he actually does it on 5 Live as well, on the radio still, punditry. But not really to my taste. If we look at the DAZN commentators, we've got Mike Costello, who's the head commentator. Now, Mike Costello, I have listened to him on the radio, because they were frequently when I'd be doing a night shift or working somewhere, or going way back to before the internet. Mike Costello was a good staple on the radio and a very, very good radio commentator, extremely good. It's like you were there when you were listening to him. And he spent decades doing radio, and he transferred to television as a DAZN commentator. Now, if ever there was an example of how television and radio are 2 different mediums, and how you, just because you've got skill in one area, you might not have it in another, I think Mike Costello illustrates this, because I don't mind Mike Costello as a commentator, a television commentator. I thought he was a brilliant radio commentator. As a television one, I think he lacks something. I don't think he's that bad. I know some people don't like him at all, but I don't think he's that bad. But I do think he's not a patch on what he does on the radio, and that transition to me hasn't been particularly successful. Again, this is just personal taste. As far as the other DAZN commentators are concerned, I mean, a lot of people don't like Tony Bellew because they feel he's completely partisan, and to his defence, he kind of admits he is. You remember when David Price fought Povetkin, he was screaming for Price to chin him, but for Price to chin Povetkin. He was getting real het up and visibly gutted after Price had been knocked out. Yeah, okay, look, Bellew, I just take him for what he is. I don't think he's as bad as some people say, but yeah, very often I think, well, you know, I don't agree with that at all. What are you talking about, mate? You know, but terrific fighter, wildly exciting, probably overachieved in his career, had some good wins, made a lot of money. Good luck to the guy. But as a pundit, yeah, he's all right, but I wouldn't put him in the top 3 or 4. You know, not for me personally. One of the better ones, who I believe is on TNT Sports, is Carl Frampton as a pundit. I think he's very, very good. I think he normally is objective. He gives an honest opinion. What I look for in punditry is if someone says something and I think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh yeah, you were right. It did lead to B. You know, not to where I thought it was going. You know, and Frampton has that quality. And even better than Frampton, someone I think is extremely good is Barry Jones. I really do think he's an excellent pundit. You know, little bald Welsh geezer, former world champ, briefly held the WBO super featherweight title, so he's done it. But I think he really, he's got enough of the cheeky chappiness about him without it being an act, or without it being overbearing. And very often he will, you listen to him and you will see what he's talking about, and it will be things that have not occurred to you. Again, he's someone who I listen to because I think, okay, what does he think? Yeah. In other words, I respect his opinion. I want to hear his opinion, whereas some of them, I'm not really interested in whether I hear their opinion. But as far as anchormen are concerned, the actual, you know, the guy in the studio who anchors everything, I think Paul Dempsey is very, very underrated, and I think he's on TNT boxing. Considering they've hardly got any fights coming up, they've got some pretty decent people working for them, TNT. But he's in the studio and he's very, very good. He really is very, very good. Because he has just the right balance between being, you know, informal, personable, but not, you know, he's good on screen, but at the same time he's not trying to hog it, you know. And he will ask awkward questions. He will pull people. He will be honest and say someone's given a bad performance, someone looked lousy in this fight. What a boring fight. I like that. But at the same time, he's got the enthusiasm that he actually, you know, he cares about boxing. And I think caring about boxing is a major thing for commentators, for pundits, for anchormen, for all of them. Now, one person on DAZN who I really like is Adi Oladipo. I think he's extremely good broadcaster. He's an extremely good broadcaster. He's very, very personable. you know, just a really likeable guy. I've heard from people who know him that he is actually a really nice fella as well. And I think he should really be their main sort of anchor man on Sky. Laura Woods was with Sky DAZN, isn't it? Excuse me, DAZN. Addy's on DAZN. And Addy does TalkSport as well. I think he's on TalkSport. But Laura Woods moved over from DAZN to TNT Sports. I thought she was pretty good on DAZN. I think she's a good addition to TNT's roster. Just going back to DAZN, we've got Darren Barker. A lot of people find him a little bit dry, a little bit dull. I think he's all right. I don't mind him. I wouldn't get enthused about him, but he's okay. He seems like a nice guy, and I think, you know, he's a relatable fella. Has done it. He's been a world champ. Held one of the middleweight belts, the IBF middleweight belt, was it? No problem with him, really. And then his mate, I can't even remember the name. What's his mate? Chris someone, isn't it? Damn. It'll come to me in a moment. But again, him and Darren are kind of like two cheeks of the same arse, so to speak. They're all right. They're okay. No, I ain't got a problem with them, but, you know. Don't light up the screen particularly, but there again, they don't talk a lot of nonsense, and that's, to me, that's an anathema. You start talking nonsense, you're out. I don't care how charismatic you are, how personable you seem. If you're talking bollocks, out. As far as, well, other good ones, I think punditry. Andy Lee's very good as a pundit, not so much as a commentator, but as a pundit, he's good. Who am I missing out? I'm sure I'm missing some out. You'll have to leave them. You leave your comments in, you know, who you like and who you don't like. Who have I missed out now? Let me think. I'm sure there's a few I should have mentioned. Yes. Who am I missing out? Damn. As soon as I hit stop, as soon as I say goodbye, I'm going to remember a few. Who have we gone through? We've gone through DAZN, Sky, TNT. Oh, of course, one non-Brit, which we should mention, is Paulie Malinagi, an absolutely excellent pundit, really, really good. And go over and subscribe to his YouTube channel if you haven't already. He's very, very good, and he needs to be snapped up by, like he used to work for Sky, he needs to be snapped up and used, because he's very, very good. And the Americans have got some pretty good pundits, like Jim Lampley's very good. I mean, Kellerman's off, he got sacked, didn't he, by ESPN. They downsized, as the Americans say. It means making people redundant. Brian Kenny's all right. I remember Brian Kenny from the 90s when I lived in America. He was with Max Kellerman on Friday night fights or Tuesday night fights, Friday night fights. Yeah. Anyway, I've probably forgotten a load of people, but leave your comments below. Tell me who you like, who you don't like. What would be your ideal commentary team? Don't forget, you want your commentators, you want your pundits, and your anchor man, your main guy in the studio. Tell me what you think. Who do you like? Who do you not like? And which platform do you think has got the best commentary team? Let me know. I want to hear your opinions. Thanks as always for subscribing. Please subscribe if you're new, and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Great stuff. I always appreciate your time. I'll read your comments and answer them, and bye for now.